The late afternoon sun filtered through the dense canopy of the forest as Lily guided Midnight, her sleek black stallion, along the familiar trail. The wind rustled softly through the leaves, and birdsong filled the air. Lily, just 15, felt completely at peace among the trees, where the world quieted and time seemed to slow. It was her favorite escape, a place where she could breathe without the pressure of school, expectations, or the recent arguments between her parents. Midnight moved confidently, his hooves barely making a sound on the soft forest floor. She had ridden these paths dozens of times, and every twist and turn felt like second nature. But on this particular day, she noticed something different. A narrow, overgrown path veered off the main trail, one she had never seen before. Curiosity tugged at her, as it always did. She hesitated for a moment, then gently nudged Midnight in that direction. The trees closed in tighter, and the light dimmed as they ventured deeper. The air grew cooler, and even the birds seemed to quiet. Still, Lily pressed on, captivated by the eerie beauty surrounding her. Minutes passed, maybe longer, and the forest began to look unfamiliar. She pulled gently on the reins, intending to turn back, but Midnight suddenly reared up, startled by something in the underbrush. Lily held on tightly, trying to calm him, but in the struggle she lost her balance and tumbled from the saddle. Dazed but unhurt, she stood, only to see Midnight bolt into the trees, vanishing into the thick shadows. Panic surged through her chest. She called out his name, running after him, but the forest swallowed her voice. Trees all around looked the same, no clear trail, no sense of direction. Dusk was falling fast. Lily spun in place, heart racing, realizing with sudden terror that she had no idea where she was. The house had never felt so silent. Sarah sat at the edge of Lily's bed, clutching the worn flannel jacket her daughter always wore on cool evenings. The scent of pine and the faint trace of her lavender shampoo still lingered. It had been 3 days since Lily vanished, and every corner of the house pulsed with memories. Her sketchbook strewn across the desk, boots by the door, a forgotten scarf hanging from the stair railing. Outside, search teams came and went, calling her name into the trees, combing the woods with dogs, drones, and volunteers. But each night, they returned with the same grim faces and empty hands. Sarah couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. Every creak in the house made her heart jolt. Every ring of the phone sent her running, hoping it was news, any news. Her husband, Mark, paced constantly, trying to keep himself busy by helping the search crews or organizing maps, but even he was beginning to crumble. Their once warm, bustling home now felt cold and quiet, like it had been abandoned by time. The grief was unbearable, but what truly shattered Sarah was the not knowing. No clues, no trail, no sign of Midnight or Lily. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Days turned into weeks. Police scaled back their efforts. Neighbors dropped off food and left in awkward silence. Friends stopped calling, unsure of what to say. Sarah didn't blame them. The hope that once burned in her chest now flickered weakly, threatened by every sunset that came without her daughter's return. She couldn't bring herself to wash Lily's clothes or change the bedding. She kept her phone on at all hours, volume turned high, just in case. Mark suggested they sell the horse trailer, maybe move to a new town, anything to escape the pain, but Sarah refused. "She'll come back," she whispered every night, staring out the window toward the woods. "She has too." As the years passed, the forest where Lily disappeared took on a strange, almost sacred air. People stopped venturing too deep, especially after dark. Locals began to whisper that the woods weren't the same anymore, that they carried a presence, a stillness that felt like watching eyes. The older generation spoke quietly about the vanished girl, when they gathered in the cafe or the church hall, shaking their heads and crossing themselves. Newer residents learned quickly that asking questions about the forest was met with wary glances and hushed voices. It began with stories, innocent at first. Hikers would report hearing hoofbeats echoing in the distance, though no other riders were seen. Sometimes, just as the sun dipped behind the hills, families walking their dogs would hear a girl laughing faintly, carried on the wind. A few claimed they saw a flash of something black, horse or shadow, they couldn't be sure. Others insisted they spotted a young rider deep between the trees, her long hair trailing behind her, too far away to call to, too quick to follow. But whenever someone tried to approach, the figure would vanish like smoke. One autumn evening, a group of teenage boys dared each other to camp in the heart of the woods. Sometime after midnight, they were awakened by the sound of hooves circling their tent, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. When they burst out with flashlights and trembling fists, they found nothing. No rider, no horse. Only a perfect ring of hoofprints in the mud around their camp. They fled, leaving their gear behind. From that night on, none of them ever stepped into the forest again. Sarah heard the rumors, of course. Some she dismissed as cruel pranks or overactive imaginations. But a few chilled her. A woman from a neighboring town claimed she once followed the sound of music into the woods and saw a flicker of movement, someone riding, barefoot, dressed in strange, flowing fabric. The rider turned just long enough for the woman to see a face that looked too young to be alone. When she told Sarah what she'd seen, her voice trembled. "She looked like your daughter. She looked like she hadn't aged." 8 years had passed, yet every morning still began the same way for Sarah, with her eyes drifting to the window that faced the forest. The trees stood tall and unmoved, like silent sentinels guarding a mystery she had never been allowed to solve. She had learned to live around the ache. It didn't fade, it only settled, like dust in the corners of her life. She still kept Lily's room just the way it had been. She still walked past Midnight's empty stable every evening, brushing her hand along the wooden door, half expecting to hear a soft nicker in return. That morning, a postcard arrived in the mail, an advertisement for a regional equestrian contest just 2 counties over. Sarah almost threw it away without a second glance. But something made her stop. The image showed a graceful horse mid-jump, and for a fleeting moment, she thought of Midnight. It was foolish, she told herself. Still, her fingers lingered on the card, tracing the date. The event was this weekend. She hadn't gone to a show since Lily vanished, not since the world lost its color. But some quiet voice in her chest whispered, "Go." She arrived at the arena just before noon, parking far from the crowds. She sat in her car for a long while, gripping the steering wheel. Children ran by, dressed in riding gear, their parents trailing behind with coolers and cameras. The sounds of laughter, hooves on dirt, and distant announcers drifted through the air. It all felt so painfully familiar. She stepped out slowly, unsure if she was truly ready to walk among the memories. But her feet moved on their own, carrying her to the edge of the arena. As she watched riders take their turns, Sarah felt both distant and close. To the moment, as if she stood outside of time. She wasn't expecting anything, not anymore. This was just a way to feel close to Lily, to honor what had been taken. And yet, as the next number was called over the speaker, a strange energy stirred in her chest. A new rider was entering the arena. A black horse, tall and powerful, trotted in. And something in Sarah's heart began to race. The horse entered the arena with a grace that instantly hushed the crowd. Tall, black, and gleaming under the afternoon sun, it moved with a fluid strength that made heads turn. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There was something hauntingly familiar in the way it carried itself, each stride confident, smooth, purposeful. The announcer's voice echoed across the field, calling out a rider's name that meant nothing to Sarah. But the horse, there was no mistaking it. That was Midnight. She would know him anywhere. Her knees went weak as she gripped the railing, eyes locked on the pair in the ring. The rider sat tall in the saddle, wearing a deep blue riding coat and a dark helmet that obscured most of her face. But the way she handled the reins, the gentle cues she gave the horse, the way she leaned into the turns, it was all so familiar, like a memory suddenly awakened. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She tried to reason with herself. It's just a horse that looks like him. Horses can look alike. But Midnight had a small white star-shaped mark on his left hind leg. She waited, breath held, until the rider turned sharply toward the next jump, and there it was. That same mark. That same flick of the ear before every leap. The horse soared over each jump effortlessly, as if flying. The rider moved in perfect harmony with him, her movements fluid and instinctive. It was the kind of bond that took years to build, years Sarah knew her daughter had once spent with that very horse. As the round came to a close and the crowd erupted into applause, Sarah stood frozen, unable to clap, unable to breathe. The rider turned her head slightly, as if scanning the crowd. Then she paused. Her gaze met Sarah's across the arena, and for a heartbeat, time stopped. Beneath the helmet, a pair of wide, familiar eyes stared back at her. Not just similar, identical. Sarah's hand rose slowly to her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. The girl's expression faltered, a flicker of recognition flashing through her features. The noise of the crowd faded into a dull hum. Nothing else existed in that moment except a mother and the daughter she had lost to the woods 8 years ago, staring at each other across the space of silence, disbelief, and time. Behind the arena, the air buzzed with celebration and noise, riders chatting, horses being cooled down, tack clinking against trailers. But Sarah moved through it all like a ghost, eyes darting desperately from face to face. She had pushed past the spectator barrier without even thinking, security calling after her, but no one stopped her. She barely heard them. She only saw that girl, the one who had ridden midnight, disappear through the exit gate moments after their eyes had met. Her heart pounded in her ears, her voice cracked from shouting her daughter's name, though she hadn't said it out loud in years with such hope. Then, just ahead near the stables, she saw her. The girl was dismounted, her helmet off, standing beside Midnight with her hand on his neck. Her hair was longer now, a deep chestnut brown streaked with sun and years, but it was unmistakably Lily. Her profile was the same, soft jawline, the tilt of her nose, the way she bit her lower lip when deep in thought. Sarah stopped a few feet away, unable to speak, afraid if she said anything, it would break the spell and the girl would vanish again. Lily turned slowly, sensing someone behind her. Her eyes met Sarah's once more, and this time, neither of them looked away. For a second, the space between them felt impossibly wide. Then Lily's lips parted. "Mom." The word came out small and unsure, like something remembered in a dream. Sarah couldn't move. Her breath hitched, her vision blurred, and then she was running. Closing the gap, hands trembling as she reached out. She stopped just short of touching her, afraid it wasn't real. But Lily stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around her mother, burying her face in Sarah's shoulder. Sarah clutched her with all the strength she had left. Her body shook with sobs that had waited 8 long years to be released. "I looked for you," Lily whispered, her voice breaking. "I wanted to come back, but I couldn't. I didn't know how." Sarah pulled back just enough to cradle her face. "You're here now. You're here." They stood there, surrounded by the sound of horses and footsteps and laughter in the distance, but to Sarah, the world had fallen away. She didn't know yet what had happened or where Lily had been. None of that mattered in this moment. All that mattered was that she had her daughter in her arms again, and for the first time in years, the hole in her heart began to close. They sat together on a weathered wooden bench near the far end of the stable yard, away from the noise and bustle of the contest grounds. Midnight grazed calmly nearby, as if nothing in the world had changed. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting golden light across the field. Sarah still couldn't take her eyes off Lily. She reached out every few moments, brushing her hair back, touching her arm, needing to feel her, to confirm she was really there. Lily, though older and changed, still had the same soft features, the same searching eyes. But behind them now was something else. Something deeper, a weight carried quietly. "I know you have questions," Lily said at last, her voice quiet and steady. "And I'll try to explain everything." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. I thought you were gone. I thought I'd lost you." "I was lost," Lily said, her gaze dropping to her hands. "After I fell that day, I ran after Midnight. I was scared, disoriented. I kept calling for him, but the forest seemed endless. Then I got turned around. I walked for hours, maybe longer. I don't know. And then I saw them." "Who?" Sarah whispered. "There was a group, people who live deep in the forest, completely off-grid. They're different, isolated, not dangerous, but cautious. They found me. They took me in." She paused. "I was hurt. My ankle was swollen, and I was crying. I think they were afraid if they let me go, someone would come looking and find them. So they kept me. Not locked away, not in chains or anything like that, but they convinced me the world outside had forgotten me." Sarah's hands covered her mouth, her eyes filling again. "We never stopped looking. Not for one day. I know that now," Lily said. "I didn't know what to believe then. They told me I'd never survive out there again, that no one would know me, that the world had changed. I was just a kid. I didn't know how to challenge them. Over time, I stopped trying. But why now?" Sarah asked. "Why today? Why here?" "They had horses," Lily said. "That's how I stayed connected to who I was. Riding kept me sane. Midnight found his way to me again not long after I was taken in. And over time, I became their best rider. A few months ago, a man passed through their camp. A traveler. He saw me ride. He said I could compete. I knew it was a risk, but I had to try. I had to see if the world was still out there. If you were still out there. Sarah took her daughter's hands and gripped them tightly. You never stopped being mine. I don't care what happened. You're home now. Lily leaned into her mother's shoulder, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. For the first time in 8 years, she didn't feel lost. The road home felt both familiar and new. Sarah drove slowly, one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching over to squeeze Lily's. The young woman now, sat quietly beside her, gazing out the window as if rediscovering the world. The soft hum of the engine was the only sound between them for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like a long exhale after holding one's breath for far too long. Midnight followed behind in a borrowed trailer, calm and obedient as ever. Somehow, he had aged with the same quiet dignity as Lily. Though his muzzle was flecked with gray now, his eyes still held the same fierce loyalty. Sarah kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half afraid it would all vanish if she blinked. As they pulled into the long driveway, the house appeared just as Sarah had left it, nestled at the edge of the trees, its white paint faded slightly, the front porch still creaking under the weight of time and memory. Lily stared at it, unmoving, for several seconds. I didn't think I'd ever see this place again, she said softly. Sarah turned the car off and reached for her. You're home. That's all that matters. Inside, everything was still as it had been. The photos on the walls, the ceramic mug with Lily's name on the kitchen shelf, the blanket draped over the couch. Sarah hadn't changed a thing, not because she couldn't move on, but because she never stopped believing Lily might walk through that door again. Lily wandered through the house like someone exploring a dream. Her fingers skimmed across surfaces, pausing on picture frames, familiar furniture, the small drawing taped to the refrigerator, her own handwriting from years ago. I thought all of this would be gone, she whispered. I couldn't let it go, Sarah replied, standing behind her. I couldn't let you go. They spent the rest of the day in quiet companionship, sharing small things. Sarah made Lily's favorite pasta, and Lily, awkward at first, helped set the table like she used to. As the evening fell, they sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun disappear behind the forest that had once taken so much. Do you think they'll come looking for you? Sarah asked gently. Lily shook her head. No, they'll know I made my choice. That I came back to where I belong. Sarah nodded. We'll tell your story in your time. No pressure. No reporters. Just us. That night, Sarah stood in the doorway of Lily's room, watching as her daughter curled up under the same comforter she'd used as a child. Midnight rested quietly in the barn outside, as if standing guard once more. For the first time in years, the silence in the house felt comforting, not hollow. The ache in Sarah's chest had softened into something else, something like peace. The past would always be there, shadowed and strange, but now the future stood wide open. And in that quiet home, under the moonlight streaming through the windows, a mother and daughter, once torn apart by the unknown, began to rebuild a life, one breath, one word, one day at a time.